The National Literary Trust recently published some research to say that children's reading enjoyment is at its lowest in almost 2 decades. Their research has shown that over half, 56% of children or young people aged between 8 to 18 don't enjoy reading in their free time, which is an all-time low statistic since they began surveying children in 2005. Now, I know I'm probably speaking to the converted here, as most of my audience are teachers. Hopefully some parents are watching this as well. And I know that my sort of, not expertise because I'm not an expert, but my sort of area of interest is much more in sort of technology and stuff. But I cannot emphasize enough how important reading for pleasure is. Research has shown that the single biggest indicator to how successful children will be later on in life, the single biggest indicator is whether they read for pleasure. Well, I'm not an expert when it comes to reading and reading for pleasure. I know there are plenty of people online that you can follow, such as John Murray, Emily Weston, Simon Smith, on Twitter, Reading Rocks and the likes. What I want to try and do in this video is just share a couple of tips so that when you are reading with your pupils in class, you can really encourage them to read for pleasure as well. I think firstly, as teachers, we've got to appreciate how important we are as role models and encouraging reading for pleasure. Whether we like to admit it or not, in an ideal world, we'd love all of our parents to be reading for pleasure regularly with their children at home. The likelihood is that doesn't happen as much as we'd like. Some parents don't have the time, don't have the inclination. I say it's that responsibility on us as teachers now. I see it more as a privilege. You know, we always talk about the gift of reading. It's not a gift for me. It's a right. Children have the right to be read stories, great, amazing stories. And we have that opportunity to be the person who shares those stories with our students, which they will remember forever. In school, there are 2 ways in which you read with your pupils. You read for purpose, you read for pleasure. And they can be separate, should be separate. And every day, there should be a part of our day that is dedicated to reading for pleasure without any other links to anything else. Just reading purely for the enjoyment of it. And this is the only non-negotiable I think every single teacher should follow, which is at some point during the day, not necessarily a last minute, thing we add on at the end of the day if there's time, but dedicate 15-20 minutes of every single day just reading a story for no other reason than to just enjoy it for pleasure. Number 1 tip is just enthusiasm. Believe it or not, your children look up to you and see you as a sort of role model. So if you can get across this idea that you love reading for pleasure, that you're an avid reader, and listen, you might not necessarily be, you might not have the time to as a teacher, but if we pretend and we make the children believe we are, that can have that knock-on effect. So simple things, whenever you're holding a book, what are you doing with your hands? Just stroking a book like that. When the children come into class, if you can be sat there reading, it just constantly reinforces this idea that that's something that you absolutely love doing. Sort of touched upon this, but you should be choosing books because they relate to a topic that you're doing in class. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but that shouldn't be the reason you choose a book. You should be choosing books because they have amazing stories. You should be choosing books from a wide variety of different authors to expose children to different perspectives and different stories and different characters. And when I read a chapter or a couple of chapters of the book to my class, I will always have a minute at the end to sort of summarise what we've read. And it may be the case that some children might drift off, switch off, and it's important that we allow them to engage back in by sort of talking through what we've read, what we've learned, because that's going to help them engage when we do it tomorrow. When you are reading a story with your class, just have fun with it. You can be silly, do the voices, laugh, feel, emote with your children and show the power that these incredible stories can have.